Hello everyone, welcome to my course Web API with .NET Core. So this is an introductory video wherein we will talk about what is Web API versus website, and why should I use Web API, the real-time use case of Web API, and HTTP versus REST. Let's start off with what is Web API. So for that to understand, let's talk about what API is. API is application programming interface, which is a interface or a contract that will allow one application to talk to another application through code or through programs. So that is why programmatically. So it basically acts as a bridge between two applications, and that's why it is named as application programming interface. Now the two applications can be anything. It can be a UI, and then other application can be an API. Now our two applications can be an API applications, or one can be a UI application and the other can be a database, and your API sort of passes the data from the database to the UI. So that's how the API bridges gap between these two uh, any two applications. And one step ahead, a web API. Web API is that interactions usually happens over the web or through HTTP. And I can build web API using various technologies. I can use C Sharp, I can use Java, I can use Python, right? But because this course is with .NET Core, I would be using C Sharp to build my web API. And moving on to what web API is and the difference uh, uh, with website actually is. Website is for the people to see and click. I mean, whatever you see on the screens, you click, you interact. So that's called a website. And this website uses API in the background to fetch the data from the database or from another application and display it on the screen. So website uses web API for data exchange. And why should I use a web API? So there are many use cases or uses, but three more popular ones are, as we were seeing earlier, it allows my applications to work together, and it'll make my application development time faster. Example, I have a UI developer, I have a backend developer. So UI developer would work on the front end and the backend developer would work on building API. And these two developers can work independently and make my development time faster, and we can ship the code to production faster. And the third use is it allows me to create one backend or one API for multiple applications. Like suppose say your business is having a website, it is having a mobile app. So one API or one backend can serve this website and also the mobile app. Okay, these are the uses of web API. And then moving on to the real-time use cases. So whatever website or whatever mobile app you are using on a regular basis, it would use API in the background to fetch the data and show it on the screen. Examples are YouTube, Amazon, and many more. As I said, everything, like almost all uses API to sort of have interactions or get the data. Like I can show you few API calls that happens. This is the YouTube I'm on, and if you go to F12, which is developer tools on your Chrome, and go to the network tab, you see the API calls here. Let's see, this is a request URL, this is the request method, which is get, and the status code is 200 OK, which says that my API is successful. So all this like verbs and status code we would be talking in detail uh, in the subsequent videos. Okay, and I got a response back with some data. Okay, and similarly other calls, like if you see it's a post call, these are called HTTP verbs. I will be talking in detail about this in some time. And then the status code is okay, which says response is successful, and you see some response here. So this is how you see your API calls happening from your browser, right? There are other ways also you can test your APIs. We will talk in detail about all this in the subsequent sections. Okay, and then moving on to HTTP versus REST. Now, why should I talk about HTTP versus REST? So, Web API, as we have seen, operates over HTTP and it should be RESTful. Okay, So because we are talking about these two terms, HTTP REST, we will have to understand what is the difference between these two. Okay. So HTTP is a protocol, which means that for your client, for your server, or for the two applications to communicate over the internet, it has to be over the HTTP, and it has to be in a format that HTTP mentions. Like it should have a request URL, and then it should have some request body, and then for a request, right? And for the response should send back the status codes, like if it is successful 200, such things it has to send back. So it defines rules which will allow my client and server to communicate, and web API should or will be a HTTP based, and it, as I said, it will allow or help in data transfer over the internet, and it defines some verbs, like we were seeing earlier, get, wherein it uses to fetch the data, post, it will insert the data, and then a put is for updating some data, and patch is updating only a smaller portion of the data, delete some data. So these are the widely used HTTP verbs. And then coming to REST is a architectural style or few rules using which you will have to create your API, right, for it to be in sync with the industry standard, right? You don't have to follow REST principles to create API. You can very well create your API without following REST principles, but that is not accepted. So your API should be RESTful, and what does that mean is, for it to be RESTful is following all these rules. Like for few examples are HTTP verbs, proper usage of HTTP verbs. Like in the get method, you will have to write the code only for fetching the data and returning back to the user. You don't have to put all inserts, updates, and everything in a get API, right? Such rules, it defines REST defines, and which you have to adhere to for creating a proper web API. So that's the difference between HTTP versus REST. One is a protocol. HTTP is a protocol, and that's how, and some things or some applications communicate over the internet, and web API will operate on HTTP only. But REST is a rules using which you can create a industry acceptable web API. Okay, and yeah, that's all for this course. Thanks for watching, and please do subscribe.